Hello and welcome to session 266 in the AISafety.com reading group. Tonight we'll be discussing the first half of the article Let's Think About Slowing Down AI by Katja Grace. Katja Grace is the lead researcher at AI Impacts, and this is a recent article. And we'll take the first half, including the section called The Arms Race Model, Ends and Alternatives. It's also posted in several other places. I won't go through that. So, alignment strategies. There have generally been two major kinds of alignment strategies presented for how to solve the entire problem. One of them is the one Katja Grace calls averting doom by not building the doom machine. So if we imagine that this is like working very much within the framework, here I've used a picture from the Doom Machine board game, and we're working like within the rules and concepts that society sets out. And the alternative to this is to flip the game board, as some people say it, build a pivotal, a superintelligence that can do a pivotal act that can somehow ensure that no other AIs, unaligned AIs, can ever be built. Katja Grace starts out with a fictional dialogue between these two strategies. I think it's meant to be funny, but I think in general, when you are presenting other people's arguments, I think it's very important to avoid strawmanning, and in general, making this kind of fun hyperbole is probably something that should be avoided. So the main part, the reason why this is particularly interesting is that there is in fact some kind of movement in time, in that we are just a moment. In that many people are moving towards coordination, and I can give a bit of my personal journey on how I moved from this strategy to this strategy. So I started out basically thinking I was following Bostrom's book Superintelligence Path, Dangerous Path and Strategies, Dangerous Strategies. And the key thing that I took from this was basically the coordination strategy. Bostrom doesn't quite follow this dichotomy, but that was certainly what I thought of in the beginning. But I did change that, and two things in particular soured me on trying to coordinate. One was the election of Donald Trump, that coincided with a lot of focus on China and whether China would be building AGI, and it seemed completely ridiculous, the idea that we could get some kind of coordination going with China. The second was OpenAI and DeepMind, that also was a very big loss for coordination, and that moved me towards, okay, if coordination is not going to work, let's try to do a pivotal act. But even later than that, Miri came out and said, sorry, we can't actually do this, and the timelines also got a lot shorter, and that kind of moved the pendulum back, mostly for negative reasons, in that coordination became harder. Not entirely. There's the new chip war between the United States and China that seems to be a positive argument for coordination-based strategies, but mostly this is a negative update in that doing pivotal acts just seems too hard. In order to, we need to have some kind of clarifications about this subject, because some coordination is happening. In particular, a lot of people are talking about how can we avoid speeding up progress, and that's something that's been done. My own personal view on this is that I refuse to do this on deontological grounds. I believe it is immoral to actively work towards a course of action that will end up with everybody being killed. But that's not a strategy, right? That is not something that connects to the end goal of some kind of existential security. So that's just a step you can take, but it doesn't lead to security. And in the same way, we have had a lot of consideration about how we can do differential progress, like the two progress bars dialog, coordinating at deployment time, and things like that. So the things that Catcher Grace is talking about is more wide-ranging. We're talking about slowing down AI in general, moving to things that are not quite as dangerous, and maybe indeed stopping parts of AI progress. One of the things that Catcher Grace unfortunately does not clarify is like, are we talking about 1% slowdown or 99% slowdown? I think this matters a lot, both in what are the results of this slowdown and what are the tools we have for making this slowdown. The second thing that I think really needs to be clarified are timelines, because someone who believes in very long timelines are likely going to have a very different strategic outlook from people who have comparatively shorter timelines. And finally, Catcher Grace points out that we haven't thought about how to slow down AI in sufficient detail. And I think in general, as a characterization of the AI safety community, this is correct. But also I would say that, like, it takes time to pivot, and it's quite a pivot from trying to build a super intelligence to trying to coordinate. So I think it's reasonable to expect that there is quite a bit of work to be done here. So what would be the effects of slowing down AI? Well, the thing that Catcher Grace does not say is that we would get time to solve the alignment problem. Maybe it's obvious, maybe it will come later in the article, but for now, Catcher Grace is only talking about second order effects of trying to slow down AI. And one of the unfortunate things that would happen if we try to slow down AI is that we would lose arms races to more reckless people. And unfortunately, it seems we can mostly affect the people who are least reckless, the most friendly and careful AI companies. Catcher Grace has some personal view on these, that the AI capability friends that she have are lovely. And I would like to object to this, in that I feel the AI capability people that are explicitly trying to kill us, even if it's by recklessness, is something that to me means that I cannot be friends with them. I cannot be friends with someone who tries to kill me. I can play Baccarat or something with someone who is trying to kill me, but not literally friendship. And I think that's also one thing that Catcher Grace kind of leans towards, is that we need to worry about whether we are perceived as defecting against them, because if they perceive us to be defecting against them, then we can't influence them as much. And I agree, like, we are to some substantial extent defecting against them, because we are like adversarial towards them, and just the public discussion of this may in fact be sufficient. Just talking about defection is likely sufficient to make the relationship break down. But this is not how friendships work. This is how abusive relationships work. That they are hurting us through recklessness, and we need to be very careful about how we can say that to them in a sufficiently polite way. That is not how friends works. This is how adversaries work. And I think a different discourse is in fact required when we have active adversaries that are obviously reading Catcher Grace's post and reading our comments. Catcher Grace come up with some reasonable arguments against slowing down AI, and says she will address some of them. Like, of course, we have only read half, so we don't know whether she in fact addresses all the reasonable arguments. I hope, in fact, she will address all of them. That's what you're supposed to do. And again, it seems a bit strange that the arguments will be they will go into details about them later, probably next time. And for now, the article is mostly about, like, how will we do that? How will we slow down? And normally I would put, like, is it a good idea to slow down first? So the first argument against slowing down is it won't help. We'll just die a few years later. What's the point of that? The second is like convincing people is really hard. We can't even convince some top AI researchers on this, and in order to do like universal coordination, that requires coordinating a lot of people. And regulators are some of the people we can hope to convince, but we don't know what we would say to them, so they're likely to be of little use. I suspect that next session we will come back to this. I would state up front that these three arguments are like my key objections, but Katja has some more. The first is that never building AI is bad. I think I would very reluctantly take that option if it was available, but it's obviously not. Fast progress may be better for safety. I agree, like she has these four arguments. I don't think any of them are particularly strong. I think I would have a fifth argument that we avoid hardware overhangs and software overhang, data overhangs. But in total, I am reasonably convinced that fast progress is worse for safety. Like that should be the default expectation. Another reason is that some countries are large, scary, and hard to talk to, and that's obviously China that Katja is talking about. And the seventh argument is that there might be other existential risks that we can prevent, and I think this is in fact something that needs to be investigated. I don't think it is a sufficient argument, but it is something that I think makes sense to think about in detail. Then there's some bad arguments. I won't go through them very much. Like we can personally avoid death if we build AI really soon. That's the person affecting view in Bostrom. And I notice here that I don't actually have a strong argument if someone made this argument. And something about nudities, people that think it's beautiful to create AGI, and that it's doing things that are in conflict is very bad, and like we have a quasi-taboo against direct action. And I think this is in fact not a bad argument, but a good argument. I think in general we should be nice until we can coordinate meanness, as Scott Alexander puts it. And then something about bias towards considering incentives arbitrarily strong. I think we'll get to that later. So technological restraint. There are many technologies we don't pursue because they suck too much. And Katja Grace have some examples of technologies that seem to have very poor utility. I won't actually go into a detail. I think a lot of them have been made, and both torture devices seem like an obvious thing that has negative utility, and torture devices are also actually being built in this world. And the same with things that are actively useless. Katja is kind of just asserting no one would build something that is clearly useless and clearly just wasting money, but conspicuous consumption is totally a thing. So I think this is not a very strong argument. There is no incentive to build AI that knowingly kills us. This is indeed true, but I think there should be more focus in Katja's work on the fact that this is knowingly, because most likely the people who are building it don't intend for this, but it will be an accident that kills us. Strong incentives are often not enough, because we see small practical obstacles slowing down a lot of research, and we see people making choices about technology, and this is indeed a thing that many people kind of tend to underestimate, how linear technological progress is, and how incentives don't really strongly shape things as much as sometimes there are things that have an economic incentives that people end up not doing. I think Katja is quite unclear here, saying that commonly thought, that's a strange, obviously the common people have no clue about this, and no one, it's a straw rationalist who believes that everybody should focus 100% on AGI, because AGI is obviously the most important thing in the world, and everybody should ignore everything else. So I think in general people have some kind of balance in their views in the AI safety community, and so I would like some more precision to figure out precisely what Katja means here. Katja has a great list of technologies that are slowed by ethics and safety. Here are the 10 general subjects, and I think it's a really good thing, and I strongly applaud that AI Impacts is investigating is to what extent this is something that we could emulate and be inspired by, and somehow find solace in that often technologies end up being slowed by ethics and safety. I have looked into this to a moderate extent, probably substantially less than Katja, and I'm not really that impressed. There are no really obvious things we can take from this, and one of the things in particular that I feel is like the irony of fate is that irrationality is a big thing in preventing this kind of research from happening. And that is kind of sad, right? That the community that is trying to prevent AI doom is made up by coincidence by rationalists, and then if it turns out that we live in a world where only irrational people can stop technology from being developed, that would be kind of ironic. Katja puts emphasis on the statement that restraint is not radical, and I think that's overstating the case substantially, in that I think the people who have stopped or delayed this technology have in fact not universally but very often been radicals, and radical action have in fact been a substantial part of the ways these technologies have been slowed down. Restraint is not terrorism or miraculous world government usually. So we have it is asserted by Katja that people have two central images of slowing down AI: terrorism or some kind of global agreement. And Katja is further claiming that people don't think about terrorism for long, and to my mind that kind of makes it hard to be sure that this is the central image if people don't think about it. I haven't thought much about how to use terrorism to stop AI, because it's a really obviously bad idea, right? I think, as far as I can tell, just about everyone publicly agrees that we should not try to bomb OpenAI or something like that. That's not really a really strong evidence that no one is thinking about bombing OpenAI, because if they are thinking about bombing OpenAI, then they wouldn't tell us, right? So we only have weak evidence, but I think on balance, Katja Grace's strong assertion that this is what people think about is quite wrong. Also, I think at this point there should be made some kind of distinction between slowing AI and stopping AI. And the people have somewhat different images of the two things. Stopping AI is very often related to the fictional event in the Dune universe of the Butlerian Jihad. I don't know very much about that, so I don't really have a strong image of how the Butlerian Jihad went in fiction and how we could do that in reality. So how could we slow down AI progress? Katja has a list, and that's great. The first is don't actively forward AI progress. That's like what we are doing, but it's clearly insufficient. Convince others to not to forward AI. That is kind of what we're doing, but also seems really hard and unlikely to be successful. Convince the world of AI risk. So this is like convincing the public at large, convincing politicians, etc. I put hard again, but with a question mark, because it's a lot less clear to me that this is hard. We could negotiate, we could with AI companies, we could pay them to do other things, we could reprove them. I think it's kind of funny. Is that what Anthropic is actually doing, getting the best AI researchers and just having them do something else? Perhaps. We don't know much about Anthropic. Reproofing is interesting, and I was kind of hoping that Katja would write more about this, because I think it's an interesting thing, and I guess we'll see in the next part whether she goes into more detail about this. Help worried researchers coordinate. I think that's very valuable, and definitely I think we should do more about. An example would be Miri's challenge to OpenAI and Anthropic and DeepMind as an example, but there are a number of other things. Move AI research towards safer areas. That's kind of like what was the hope with the agent foundations to get some results there that could move it in that direction. Organize specific precautions for AI research is probably a really good idea, but we don't have a lot of good actionable projects in this space. Reduce available compute and make a culture where AI labs don't help each other, and change the publishing system are also possibilities that I think should be, explored in greater detail, but are not nowhere near slam dunks. So coordination. I think Katja starts out attacking what I think is a straw man, the claim that coordination is obviously totally impossible. Like everybody, most people will find it evident that humans can in fact sometimes coordinate. Like we have politics and law and things like that. So the question is not can human coordinate, but how difficult is it to coordinate in this particular setting. And Katja is claiming that we see coordination as implausibly utopian, explicit, and very, very difficult. But even but we have in fact some positive examples, and she explicitly calls out nuclear non-proliferation as an example that did work. I think this is a moderately relevant example. It doesn't really fulfill most criteria, either this list above or from like what the desiderator for an AI agreement would be. But nuclear non-proliferation has been a primary strategic goal for all the superpowers for a long time, and it has been not totally unsuccessful. It has been somewhat successful, but for AI we would need a greater amount of success than this. Another thing we should remember is that a lot of weird dynamics happen in this world. I think it's very important to be on the lookout for this. Again, this is not a plan. One of the things that should make us more hopeful about coordination is that we don't actually need coordination. As long as we have good information in everybody's hands, then that is in fact sufficient. And that is of course nice, but it's also a thing that convincing people appears to be really, really difficult. It would also be helpful to have a wide distribution of correct information rather than having it at all the relevant actors. And I agree, it would be really valuable to have that. One of the ways it has been phrased is to raise the sanity waterline, and that's been something that rationalists have tried with mixed success. But I agree that if it was possible to substantially raise the sanity waterline, that would strongly help on AI coordination. Katja models or talks about how people model the decision to build AGI or not as an iterated prisoner's dilemma. So the first model she has is the arms race, where you can, if no one builds AGI, then they get 0 utility. If both actors build AGI, they get -1 each, and they get a big advantage of being the only one to build AGI. So that is the arms race model. And the suicide race is similar, except that when people build it, then they are certain to be killed by this AI, and so that's a game that you would never want to play. And then there's the safety or suicide race, where you have, if you build the AGI, then you can build it safe, and then you will always win. If both build the AGI, then there's a 50% probability that they will destroy the world, so they get this moderately bad outcome. So these are 3 models that Katja Grace, both she claims they are iterated prisoner's dilemma, and they're not really iterated, but it's also quite unclear to me who she is suggesting have these models. I think it's likely that some people have the arms race model. I think it's unlikely that a lot of the relevant actors have the suicide race, and I think the safety and suicide race probably are also things that people don't have. And Catcher Grace agrees. It's not obvious that we are, in fact, in an actual AGI arms race. And I think at this point, when we're trying to have these models, it's really important to distinguish the two things. What situation are we actually in, and what situation do people perceive us to be in? Because, like, obviously, I expect that some people may perceive us to be in an arms race, but actually we are in a suicide race, or something like that. She also has a quote here that I was somewhat confused about. My friends argue that even a sliver of a chance of taking over the entire future is worth any risk to humanity. I may be misunderstanding her, but if that is indeed the case, she should really find some new friends. And I think there may be some kind of misunderstanding here. So the race slash anti-race. This is, in fact, the race dynamics. Catcher Grace has tried to model this using some spreadsheets that we can play with. They're here, and this is like a two-player game that's called the race anti-race, where you can decide, do you want to focus on safety or do you want to focus on speed to build AGI. And these models support the claim, according to Catcher Grace, that it's unclear if you should go faster or slower. And she's tried a scenario where it really looks like it would be smart to go faster, but it actually seems smarter to go slower. And the reason for this is that there is some kind of transfer of safety effort from one project to the other. And she claims that you get a 50% transfer of safety effort to the other project, and that's a steep discount. And I strongly agree. In fact, this is not a steep discount. I think it's really, really generous. And I'll try to argue both, like the two actors may have very different AIs. So transferring, expecting the safety effort to just transfer is quite unlikely. I think also doing transfer in general is just really, really hard. For having some work done in Microsoft and getting that used in Google is non-trivial. I think in this case we have actors like Facebook AI that explicitly rejects AI safety, explicitly rejects the transfer. And I think in that case, expecting 50% transfer is extremely optimistic. My intuition is that we're going to get like 1 in 10,000 or something like that, that there is no real substantial transfer. But when I play with this spreadsheet, my conclusion is that whether you raise or you don't raise, that doesn't actually matter. We are doomed no matter what. And Catcher Grace ends the first half of her article by the admonition to remember that we are in a more elaborate world with all kind of unmodeled affordances, and we should try to get out of the arms race. And it's unclear to me who she's actually talking to. Is she talking to OpenAI, who is considering to build AGI? Is she talking to Miri, who is considering whether to make a pivotal act? Is she talking to AI safety researchers who should stop using this this arms race model? Again, I don't think that we are in anything like this arms race. So I am a bit confused about this conclusion. That is all for today. Thank you and see you next time.